Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Energy Talk podcast, where we share stories about the energy industry. My name is Olubumi, and I'm excited to be here again this week. Today, it's all about energy access. We have on the show Ruairi from Light Up the World, and he's going to be sharing with us about some of the work that his organization does in rural Peru, where they bring solar electricity to communities that are in remote areas that don't have access to electricity, and now they're helping build the community through social enterprise. And it's going to be a very insightful conversation, not just from an organizational standpoint, also from a personal standpoint, as Rory shares his story of how he grew and learned through his experiences volunteering and being part of organizations like Light Up the World. So this is going to be a very educational and a very human episode to talk about personal motivation and about just wanting to be part of the good you want to see in the world. So without any further ado, I hope you enjoy my conversation with Rory.
My name's Ruairi McLoughlin. I'm the social enterprise manager with Light Up the World in Peru. Light Up the World's an organization, a non-profit organization working in energy access. Most of our work is now in Peru. So we've been in Peru since 2010, and we operate under three pillars of work. So our sort of main area of work is projects. And what those projects are is they're projects that we carry out with corporate and academic partners, primarily in North America. So those partners provide us with funding and with volunteers, and they allow us to go to rural areas in Peru and in some other countries too, but mostly in Peru, and to provide solar energy installations to families and communities who are living without access to electricity. And so those partners provide the funding and the volunteers who come down to Peru to learn more about solar energy and also to help out with installations in communities. And that's the main part of our work. We also operate through training and education. So we offer training courses in Lima and in other parts of Peru on solar energy, and particularly off-grid solar energy. And so we're trying to spread knowledge about good practice and good quality solar to make sure that solar is a sustainable option here in Peru, and also, perhaps in other countries for people who might travel for training courses, for instance. And the most recent pillar of our work is the social enterprise. And so the social enterprise, through the social enterprise, we offer small solar energy systems to off-grid homes and families. So and we're trying to do that in a way that is less reliant on external funding. So we are selling products to rural families, and we're working with high quality products, but also affordable products. That mean we can get these products out into rural areas. And so I've been with Light Up the World for just over a year. I started my career in this area through an organization in the UK called Engineers Without Borders UK. And I went with them to do an international placement in Malaysian Borneo, working with a small NGO who were working, developing micro hydroelectric projects in rural communities. And I was there for 8 months. I really had a great time there, learned a lot about how NGOs operate and about energy access, and wanted to continue working in this area. And as I was coming towards the end of that placement, I heard that there was an opportunity for a second placement in Peru with one of Engineers Without Borders UK's partners, Light Up the World. And so I knew the volunteer who was in Peru at the time, and I got in contact with him, and we had a chat about Light Up the World, the project, and about Peru. And he was nothing but praise for all of those things. And so I was really pleased to be able to come to Peru. Got to Peru in June last year, June 2018, and Tom Griffith, who was the previous volunteer, stayed on as the social enterprises first manager, and I was working with him for a year. until very recently when Tom moved on, I was lucky enough to be offered the position of social enterprise manager.
Yeah, that is actually quite a journey. It's a long way from the UK where you are right now.
Yeah, yeah. Peru's a fantastic country. Yeah, really pleased to be here. And the social enterprise is a great project, and yeah, things are going well, and yeah.
Okay, so since you joined the organization, what has as your expectations changed behind the work that they do? Because the your role actually makes you so involved with the community that you're working with. So how has that been for you, like learning about the people and the families and the communities that you guys are supplying energy to?
Yeah, that's a really interesting part of our work, and I mean, it's really core to everything that Light Up the World does. So yeah, we're really lucky that we get out into areas of Peru that other even Peruvians might not travel to. So it's Peru's a really beautiful country, and we get to travel up into really remote parts of the mountains and other areas, and to work with communities who are living in these areas. And that's for me as someone coming into Peru, that's a really amazing experience. But it's also it's a great thing for us to be able to go into those areas and to help people who are living often in quite harsh conditions, and to be able to try and bring technologies to those areas that I think really improve people's quality of life. And yeah, people are really pleased to be able to access those technologies, and they can be quite life changing, I think, in many cases. And so for us, it's really enjoyable experience. It's something that I'm really proud to be a part of, and I think I'm really lucky to be able to be a part of that, and to get out and see those areas, and meet those people. And the people that we meet in the communities in which we work are, really friendly, so hospitable to us. They often, we cook us good food and really take care of us while we're working in the communities. And I think that's a product of the way that Light Up the World works. And we work really hard to make sure that we develop good relationships with communities, both before we carry out projects and afterwards, to make sure that people have good support, and they're able to come to us with any problems that they might have. And through that, we tend to have quite long-lasting relationships in the communities in which we work.
Yeah. That is one of the things that attracted me to your organization as well. So before we get a bit too specific about the work you do in Peru, let's just talk on a global sense and talk about energy access for a bit. On your website, there is this like very short description of the work you do, and it says almost 1 billion people on the planet do not have access to electricity, and Light Up the World brings solar electricity to families living off the grid. And that is just the perfect summary of what you guys do and how important it is, because for most people in the developed world, it's a bit easy to forget that so many of the things that we take for granted, like 24-hour power supply, is not the reality of many people around the world. And the work that you guys are doing in Peru is something that is extremely important, especially because I'm sure you know this by now. Just a little bit of energy access for families in remote areas, it has a significant impact in terms of their quality of life and just how much they can accomplish during the day, and just the simple things that so many people have gotten used to. Uh, Technologies like solar really gives these people more of an option, more opportunity in order to develop themselves and their communities around them. So have you had that kind of experience personally while working?
Uh, yeah, absolutely. I think you make a really good point. Energy and electricity access is something that none of us in like in lots of parts of the world, we don't even think about having access to as much electricity as we could possibly want in our homes. And we're often, we have washing machines, and every appliance that you could possibly think of, and televisions and computers, and yeah, all of those things are things that we're born with, and we grow up with in many cases, and we become used to. And yeah, where there are 1 billion people, I'm not sure if that's the exact number, but somewhere around there, that's a huge percentage of the world that don't have access to electricity. And yeah, so it's something that I think it would be great if the rest of the world was more conscious of. But I think the good thing is that we're one of thousands or tens of thousands of organizations who are working around the world to try and bring that number down, and the number is shrinking all the time. And the number is shrinking through the invention of new technologies. So, in the social enterprise here in Light Up the World, we work with technologies that are being distributed around the world now, and so those technologies are really designed specifically for electrification and designed specifically for those that those 1 billion people or yeah, and they're really high quality products, really affordable products, and they're getting better all the time. So they're able to offer people who didn't have access to electricity and perhaps relied on kerosene lamps or different more basic forms of lighting that are often quite bad for people's health and don't really provide very good lighting at all, and are even quite dangerous in some cases. And they're able to provide more and more options to people in those circumstances. So we're starting to see, whereas maybe 5 years ago it was primarily solar lanterns that these companies were working with, now there are a whole range of technologies that range from basic lighting for off-grid homes up to systems now that include things like televisions, and we're starting to see fridges and fans and even laptops in some cases. So yeah, there's it's a lot of people, and it's a shocking statistic, 1 billion people without access to electricity. um, but yeah, I mean, the world is really, around the world there are lots of great initiatives, and there's a lot of progress being made, so that's really great to see. And I think my personal experiences, it's been really eye-opening, both my time in Malaysia and here in Peru, to go out and see the areas in which people live. And there's certainly a part of it where it's quite surprising, and it takes a while for us to adjust to seeing that people are living in places without light. But I've also been struck really in both Malaysia and here in Peru that in many ways people living in rural communities, they're really, don't know what the word would be, but people deal with the circumstances in which they find themselves really well. And the people, we find people in rural areas, they work really hard in agriculture or whatever it might be, and they're still leading good quality lives. But there are things that we can do, I think, around the world to make sure that everyone has access to technologies that can make their life a little bit more comfortable. And in some cases, there are even technologies that might help people with whatever it is that they might do for a living. Um, yeah, but yeah, so really great that we're making progress, and yeah, really eye-opening experience for me overall.
Okay. So you've been there for about a year now. Do you have any significant challenges that you think you've faced with your team or just personally with the work that you do? The last conversation I had with an NGO in Peru, we talked a little bit about the people not being too open to groups that are bringing in technologies because they might not trust them, and it takes time to develop the relationship with the communities that you're working with. But with Light Up the World, it's been active for a very long time, since 1997, I think. So does that help in bridging the connection between the communities and the individuals that you work with, or is it still a challenge you face today?
Absolutely, it's a challenge, but it's a really important part of the work we do. And like you say, so Light Up the World was founded sort of over 20 years ago now, and it's been in Peru for just under a decade. And the the relationships with communities are absolutely core to everything that we do. And so it's influences the structure of the organization and the way we work. So we have an office in Lima, in the capital city, and that's really important because that's why we buy materials and we do lots of other important sort of parts of the running of the organization. But we also have regional offices in different parts of the country where we work. and we have local staff members who are really experienced in working with communities, building and developing those relationships, and just going through the whole process of getting to know communities, understanding their needs, and then communicating those needs to everyone involved in the project, and then helping to make sure that right throughout the project we're working as closely as possible with the community. I think it is really challenging, particularly because in Peru we work in remote areas, and that means that often it's really quite difficult in terms of logistics to be able to get to these places, and we do need to make sure that we have a strong presence in the community, like I said, right from the beginning, right through till after the project is completed, and that means that it's often quite expensive because we're often traveling maybe 4 or 5 hours in a 4x4 to try and get to some of the furthest away communities, and we need to do that journey, numerous times. And so, yeah, it's a really challenging part of our work, but I think it's just the nature of the work we do. The people in Peru who don't have access to electricity generally don't have access to electricity because it's so difficult to install infrastructure to these areas, and so it's just a natural part of the work we do.
So this is where the sponsors and specifically the volunteer program comes largely in play with how the organization functions. Since it's nonprofit, apart from the rural work that you do, there's a real need for people to recognize the importance of what you're trying to achieve, and also for people who have a bit of experience to join into the team. So how is the community for volunteers with the work that you do, and how do you see them develop personally and professionally while they're with you and they work with you through your project?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question, and yeah, I guess something. I've been a volunteer for sort of quite a while now. I'm just going into a full-time position, but I think, like I was saying, Light Up the World's made up of both Peruvian staff who have lots of experience in it from who work often with the communities in our regional offices, and often, but also we really benefit from interns and volunteers who come from other countries, and those sort of really support the work that Light Up the World does, and through partnerships with organisations like Engineers Without Borders UK and a programme with the Government of Canada, the Global Affairs Programme, the organisation is able to take on more projects. So the social enterprise, for example, has been supported by volunteers and interns for the last couple of years, and it's a big part of what the organisation is trying to do in Peru. And I think for both, for me, it's been an amazing experience leaving the UK and being able to travel to Malaysia and to Peru and to get involved in this sort of work has really opened my eyes to the world, I guess. I mean, you can read about development work in books and everything, but it's really you can't really appreciate the importance of this work, I think, or understand the challenges that are involved until you have an opportunity to get involved in that. And so, I think internships and volunteering placements with NGOs are, they're really, really important for bringing people into the development world and giving people an opportunity to learn about what's really involved. And I think through that, it's a really important way of making sure that there are people with the right skills to push forward the sorts of organizations that are tackling challenges like energy access. And I think also for the local staff that we have here, it's really interesting for local staff to work with maybe foreign volunteers and interns who come in, and I think both groups of people learn a lot and really benefit by working with the other. Yeah, I think so I think yeah, really great for both sides and a really interesting dynamic. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So what about the dynamic with the local government that you work with? One of the things that I always wonder is these communities are still under the protection of their governments, but most of the time they don't really put much effort into actually reaching out to them. And I get the fact that the logistics behind extended the national grid out to all the people in the country is not always practical, but this is where the renewable energy you guys use comes into play, because it really allows um, energy to go into areas that are more remote and more reclusive from the larger cities and populace. But right now, do you guys have any challenges with the solar technology you use in terms of battery storage and just in terms of the utility of it? And how are you guys progressing in terms of developing your technology behind for the work you do and just for the future in other places that you work with?
Absolutely, yeah. So you mentioned working with governments here in Peru, and that's a yeah, it's a really important part of our work is understanding what the government's doing in terms of rural electrification. And yeah, in Peru, there are lots of programs. So grid extension is happening in some areas, um, and the government is also working with solar technology. So that's in many ways that's great, and we're always looking for how we can work in ways that complement those programs. Uh, yeah, so so that's what we're trying to do, and yeah, there are lots and lots of. I think the government's carried out sort of 150,000 solar installations now, so that's becoming a big part of the industry here in Peru, but it isn't always carried out in a way that has the community's engagement and involvement. And so we're also looking for ways that we could perhaps support local governments or local authorities to better understand and manage solar projects. In terms of, I think you mentioned battery recycling there, or battery technologies. And so, yeah, a big, as we move towards the use of solar technologies in rural areas, two of the things that are really important are making sure that communities and local authorities have, like I was talking about, the right skills and knowledge and understanding of technologies and supply chains as well, to make sure that those systems can be sustainable over the long term. And so some of the things that Light Up the World is working on are, first of all, we'd like to be doing more training and education with local authorities, with communities, to make sure that those things are in place. But we're also starting to look at how we can support people who have maybe systems that are 5 or 6 years old and perhaps need battery replacements or other types of maintenance. And so we're always trying to have that as something that we can offer to rural communities that we come across, and we work with municipalities to try and identify where those communities are and to be able to provide those services.
Okay. Okay. That's wonderful. What about in terms of climate action? Lots of you mentioned that lots of the communities you work with are farming communities, so they depend on the soil to produce what they need to survive and to eat. And in terms of displaced hardship that comes from climate action, most of the time the areas that suffer the most from things like lack of attention to the environment are the areas that they don't have the infrastructure in place to really escape or to deal with some of the consequences that come with that. So, from the work you're doing, do you see any of the experiences with people who are not doing so well, and how does your organization help with that?
Yeah. So I mean, maybe not so much first-hand experience, but I think in terms of the displaced hardship concept, Peru's a really interesting country because historically Peru certainly has not contributed to climate change it as much as other countries around the world. So I think Peru's emissions over the years would be much smaller than other countries. Um, but it's a country that's really vulnerable to the effects of climate change, and particularly people who live in the sort of areas that we work in. So often people in the areas that we work in are working in agriculture, and often using more traditional agricultural practices that are much more vulnerable to changes in weather, changes in rain pattern. And yeah, for sure, those people are not people who have consumed lots and lots over the course of their lifetimes, and but they are the people that will be really affected by that. And I think, right across the country, even within Peru, there's a huge gap between people who live in the capital city, Lima, which is sort of 10 or 11 million people, about a third of the country, and people who live in the urban areas of the country, who really much more vulnerable to how to changes in the climate and changes in weather. But also people who live in the capital are really reliant on food that comes from the provinces of Peru, so areas outside of the capital, for their food supply, and also for their water supply, which comes from the mountains, from glaciers. And climate change is really changing how agriculture is in rural areas, and it's really as well that the glaciers in Peru are getting smaller, and so there are threats to both food supply and water supply in the capital city. So yeah, Peru is a really interesting case in that regard. In terms of what we're trying to do as an organization, we're this is sort of something we're definitely not experts in any of this stuff, and our focus has always been on electricity access and on providing electricity access through solar. We are starting to look at different technologies that we might be able to implement in agriculture. So one of the things that we're talking about and researching is solar powered water pumping and irrigation. But that's certainly something that we're still in the early stages on, and something that we would like to be able to offer that might be able to help combat some of the effects of climate change. And we're those are things that we'd like to learn more about in the future.
Okay. So I just want to take a bit of a step back and talk a bit about you personally, if you don't mind. You mentioned that you spent a lot of time of your working career in the UK, and then you decided to go on with Engineering Without Borders. Why did you make the decision? At what point in your career were you when you decided that you just needed to do a bit of maybe it was traveling or just some international experience with NGOs and really do some more volunteer work. So what decisions led up to that, and how has it affected you right now as a person?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, interesting question. I guess there was never like a particular moment that happened, but yeah, I was working in the UK. I left school and went straight into work. And I think alongside the job that I had, I studied for an engineering degree part time. And towards the end of that degree, for my thesis project, I had to pick an area to work on, and I, for some reason, was really interested in renewable energy technologies. I can't remember exactly what got me interested in that in the first place, and I started researching renewable energy technologies, and that was when I started reading a lot about climate change. And I remember feeling quite shocked and like surprised that we weren't doing more to promote renewable energies and to combat climate change. And yeah, I just got really interested in that area and decided to pursue that through a master's degree, and continue to learn more and more about renewable energy, and also started to get more and more interested in international development. So I think I was living in London at the time, and London's a really interesting place to be because there's a lot of universities holding talks and events on a whole range of topics. And I was doing studying with lots of people who were like-minded people who were concerned about the same things that I was concerned about. And I think step by step I started to, I guess, get an idea of what I felt passionate about and what I wanted to work in. And those things were certainly climate change, and also I guess at that time it was just an interest in international development, and I thought that was something that I thought I wanted to give a try. And so yeah, going and getting involved in an international volunteering placement was the perfect way to do that. And yeah, I really just was lucky to be able to join Engineers Without Borders UK and to go to Malaysia and work with a fantastic organization there. And that motivated me to carry on in working in this field. And then again, really lucky to be able to come to Peru and again work with a really great organization here with Light Up the World. And but through those two placements, I've just been able to learn a lot about what how people are working with rural communities and how people are able to offer these bring technologies that are really important and can be life changing to rural areas. And yeah, it's just been a great experience for me, and so really pleased to be a part of it and keen to continue working in this area.
That's wonderful. You've had a very interesting experience being exposed to two different dynamics of renewable energy developments and climate actions. Being in the UK, a very developed part of the world, and then moving on to Malaysia and then to rural areas of Peru. So you really have an interesting take on this, I'm going to assume. So if you're going to start a conversation with some of your colleagues back in the UK or other parts of the world about sustainable developments in renewable energy and about climate action, how would you start the conversation to get people to really listen and understand that this is something important that they need to be paying attention to?
It's a really good question. Maybe something I should think about before I go back to the UK. I think like you were saying earlier, energy access is something that we don't think about, but I think everyone can relate to. So I think if you talk to people about not having electricity, people can relate to that concept, and they can think about how important electricity access, or whether all sorts of energy access, whether it's like fuel for cars or electricity in your home, or perhaps something where you work. I worked in a factory, so that was huge amounts of energy being consumed to produce things, and those things are all around us all of the time. So I think with energy access, it's something that people really can relate to. I guess the question is how to make people really care about that and really take an interest. I mean, everyone I talk to about the work I'm doing back in the UK is really interested and really supports it. So I guess it's just there are energy access is one of many challenges that the world needs to overcome in the next however many years, and I think it's just more about this people talking about climate change or talking about equality around the world, or whatever it is, and people really getting into those conversations, because I think a lot of these things are easy to sympathize with once you're talking about them and once you're thinking about them. So perhaps it's just about getting the conversation started around the world. And I don't know, I think that's something that is happening. Maybe it's just the circles that I'm in, but I see more and more things on the internet, on social media, in my friendship groups in the UK. People are talking about whether it's sustainability. I think you see a lot of people talking about reducing plastic waste or moving to renewable energies and trying to find ways of living more sustainably. These are things that I think people are talking more and more about, and they're becoming more and more mainstream. I think, certainly for sustainability issues, the word is spreading, and there are positive things happening. Perhaps with international development issues, they're slightly more confined to people who are studying or working or interested in that space. But I don't know. I think from what I see, I think hopefully people are becoming more aware and more conscious. Yeah, and I think there are sort of lots of good stories coming from around the world as well. So I don't know, particularly in the social enterprise area that we're working in, there's lots of sort of projects that are starting to communicate the benefits of how international development can also be help to build local economies and people becoming entrepreneurs in the energy access sector, or people starting their own businesses whilst trying to meet a social aim. So pick a sustainable development goal, and then hopefully you'll see lots of examples of how people trying to tackle those problems are also helping to tackle secondary problems, and help people to provide people with opportunities for work or education or study. And so lots of coming back to your original question, I guess one of the ways um, to try and get people talking about this is to talk about the positives that are involved in all of this, as opposed to it all being negative. I mean, there's lots of good things happening, and whether it's moving to clean energy or getting people access to clean water, there are lots of sort of positive stories that we can tell about the people that are doing those things around the world. And I think talking about things in a positive light and highlighting the successes that are being made right around the world is a much more engaging way to talk about these issues than perhaps doom and gloom, and everything's really bad, and we're all gonna everything's gonna be horrible in 15 years. So certainly I think being positive is an important thing that we should all be trying to do.
Definitely, definitely, especially with organizations like yours that have such an international network around the world, and especially with the volunteering program. Because what I find with people who I talk to have volunteered with companies or organizations or NGOs who do work around sustainable development in areas that they are not from originally, is they have such a more formed um conversation around things like energy access and climate issues, because they've seen firsthand not only the effects of the technology can have in certain communities, but also they've had the experience for themselves to really know that this is something that lots of people who are hardworking and intelligent are really working very hard towards solving these problems. So I also believe that like people like you and people like everybody involved a lot of the world are a very essential part of this conversation, because personal recounts and personal stories really go a long way in order to break through all the mainstream and all the doom and gloom rhetoric that goes around sometimes. So it's actually very good. I am always excited to have conversations with people like you and people who work with things that you're working with as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it's and it's certainly a big part of Light Up the World's work. But people, I think once people get involved with working in something, and they get to see the realities of, in our case, energy access, it's a big difference compared to having a little bit of exposure to that through something that you see online or something. So yeah, people being involved and interacting, for people who come and volunteer with Light Up the World, and they get to travel to a rural part of Peru, and really get to know and interact with the communities that we work with. I think that's, it's an amazing experience for the volunteers, and I think it changes the way that people view the world around them when they go back to wherever it is that, whichever country they might live in. So I think it's a really important part of the sort of movement towards a more sustainable and a fairer world, is everyone becoming more aware of the challenges that there are in different countries, and putting a human face to it. And hopefully that helps the people that engage with Light Up the World and any other organization around the world to think more about how they can contribute towards a more positive world in the future. And I think that people who, we really see it here. People who come here, they're really humbled by the experience, and people really want to support that cause going forward.
Yeah, and I'm sure it's a very good feeling coming and seeing how people grow and develop through their volunteer program, or just people who are residents there, and seeing how they become really care about the work they do, and that in turn translates to how much effort they put into the work. So, and especially from where I'm from Nigeria, and renewable energy conversations and talk about climate actions is not a very popular topic there. So as far as a country, it's a very long step to having suitable conversations around the area. But in the same way, there are also individuals and organizations working very, very hard, and just seeing them existing, it's always a ray of hope for the future, because I believe that with these many people working about it, people are passionate and people who are always willing to put in the work and to engage with communities and societies that are different from theirs. I think it's going to be a very, very good translation for the future of not just energy, but also for everyone as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, everyone who I've come across in the work that I've been doing for the last couple of years has been, so motivated to really work hard and do a good job. And whether that's local staff who are really passionate about helping, their fellow compatriots to live a better life and to, yeah, uh, or it's whether it's volunteers and interns who come in and who are interested to work in this sort of field. Those are all really good examples of people who have feel really strongly about working towards a sort of fairer world, or whatever you want to call it. And yeah, that's a really positive sign, because I think it's something. I think a lot of young people these days want to make a positive contribution. They want to leave the world in perhaps a better place than they found it. And so, yeah, that really does give us hope for combating the many problems that we have, whether it's like climate change or energy access, or any of the other things that are really important in the world. And yeah, I think hopefully that's a sign of good things to come, and it's something that will continue people looking for ways that they can contribute to that movement in their career or in their personal life. Um, yeah, and it's a really inspiring thing to be a part of. So we just got we have interns and volunteers coming in every fairly regularly at Light Up the World, and yeah, everyone who comes in brings some new energy and some is super motivated and inspired to do their best and work really hard. And that's one of the ways that we're able to carry out all the work that we do. So yeah, really, really positive, and yeah, really great.
Yeah, I'm very happy to have this conversation go this way. Is there anything else you would like to say to the audience about the work you do, the projects you have coming up, or just personally, any lessons you think you've learned over the past year and the few months you spent in Malaysia as well, concerning international developments and meeting new people in different communities that you feel like more people should know about as they progress through their personal lives and through their professional lives in whatever work they do?
Um, no, I guess, I mean, if people, your audience listening to this podcast will be people who are interested and passionate about this sort of work. So yeah, I think if people listen to this and they're interested in getting involved in international development or working in energy access, there are lots of different ways that people can get involved. And for me, I'm really, really pleased that I decided to do that a couple of years ago, and I really recommend anyone else to get in contact with the organizations that you find interesting, and see if there's a way that you could support what they're doing, whether it's from where you live, or being involved in a placement, or I don't know, doing whatever activity it might be. And also, no, just on sort of in terms of what we're doing here, we're always trying to get in touch with people who are interested in our work. And yeah, you people can get hold of our organization on Facebook or on Twitter, through our website. So perhaps we could leave those details with you to share with your listeners if they're interested. You can find my email address, and be really, really keen to hear from people. Yeah, anyone who's interested in our work, and to check out the work we're doing on social media.
Definitely. I'll be leaving all the contact information for the organization and for you personally, if you don't mind, in the description of the show. Thank you so much, Rory, for giving me the time today. It's been a very interesting conversation to learn more about your personal motivations and about the wonderful work that you and your team and everybody involved is doing in Light Up the World in Peru and everywhere else you guys are involved with. Hi again, everyone. I hope you enjoyed the conversation I just had with Rory. It was very insightful and personally very motivating as well to have these kind of conversations about just wanting to do good and really being part of organizations that align with your vision and just chasing a career just because you want it or just because of other reasons that are not so beneficial, I guess. So I'm really glad you joined me again this week. It's been a pleasure having you guys on. So a quick update about the podcast and about how the format for the future is going to be. There are going to be a few changes, but not too much. A few things we're trying to connect more with you, the listeners, to find out where you're listening from and just to have you guys on as a closer community so we can talk more about the conversations we have. If you have questions or just want to dive deeper and really have these kind of conversations more regularly. So to that end, we've set up social media pages. You can find us on Instagram and Twitter at The Energy Talk and also on Facebook, but we're more active on Instagram and Twitter, so you can just get in touch with us or you can get in touch with our email, which is now in the description of the podcast. So that's The Energy Talk Podcast at gmail.com. You can get in touch with us with inquiries or anything else you would like to find out. You can also visit the website at theenergytalk.com. And a few of the format changes are going to be in the future. The next episode is going to be all about these changes. We have a new team member who's going to be helping out producing the show. Her name is Jennifer. She'll introduce herself next week in the bonus episode. And then after the bonus episode, there probably won't be an episode in the last week of August, while we work out some of the format changes and the system changes we want to have for the podcast. So all this is just so we can have better quality and bring you more insightful conversations without any of the fluff and really get into the meat of the conversation. So it's a pleasure having you guys on. I'm really excited for what the future of the podcast will be like, and I really hope that you stick along with us and while we grow, because this is when this episode goes out, it's going to be about 2 months now, or just about 2 months the podcast has been up, and it's been a thrill so far, and I'm really excited for what the future holds. So we're not done yet, and there's a lot more in store for the future. So I really hope you stick around while we do that. And if you'd like to support the podcast, it's very easy. You can just get in touch with us, which is the most valuable thing you can do right now, or just leave us a review if you're on Apple Podcast, or just subscribe wherever you're listening to the podcast. So this is Olubunmi Olajide, and always excited to have these conversations. It's truly my obsession right now. So thank you for being on this week. This episode was produced by yours truly, and thank you to Jensen for providing the music used in this episode.